This book has been sitting on my desk for 2 months almost, but finally, it's finally time to start the next read-along. And I don't mean to be rude to the artist, but who looked at this color and said, yeah, that's what we need to use for the paperback? It's atrocious. This is like the ugliest cover I have seen in some time. Okay. Apparently it's passionate, violent, sexy and daring. A true page-turner. Well, I haven't seen anything sexy yet, but I've also only read 3 chapters. There was a bit of violence, no passion, daring, not really, page-turner, also no. The story starts off with Feyre going out hunting to find some food for her close to starving family. And literally on the first page was the first phrase that made me think, sounds a bit awkward. A shudder skittered down my spine at the thought and I shoved it away. Okay, didn't know you could shove that anywhere or at all, but now we know. I don't know, it was literally the first page and I was like, okay. While Feyre is going through the woods trying to find something to actually hunt, she hits us with the revelation that she might be Captain Obvious. Still, I would have rather spent another night with a hungry belly than found myself satisfying the appetite of a wolf or a faerie. You would rather go hungry for another day than be eaten yourself. Wow, who wouldn't? She finds herself a deer, but she has to compete with a wolf, or a rather peculiar, massive wolf, for it, and she slays the wolf. She shows some concern that this might be a high fae in disguise, but it doesn't appear to be this way because they certainly didn't fight like they were smarter than a wolf, and Feyre seemed to have a comparatively easy time with this wolf. Anyway, Feyre slays herself a wolf and gets a deer in the process. So yay, food for her family. I know literally nothing about skinning an animal, but I would like to think that skinning this wolf and getting the pelt without making a complete hash of it and, you know, getting like a proper nice pelt like you see as in like rugs sometimes. Worst interior decoration ever, but aside from taxidermied animals, but whatever. But she does this within a few minutes, and I don't know whether I should be confused because this is extremely unlikely or just impressed that she's so talented. I'm gonna go with the former though. I feel like this should take a bit longer if you do it properly. So the hunt is literally all that happens in the first chapter. I think most of the setting is actually written fairly okay. This one awkward phrasing aside, it seems fine. Nothing too exciting, even though there is some action in this chapter, but yeah, it's just a standard first chapter, I guess. In chapter 2, we get to meet Feyre's family. She comes back with her prey, is full of blood, obviously, and her family doesn't seem to care. Her family is on the verge of starvation, all eager to eat, except when Feyre turns up with food, they all act like they don't care. And also they don't care that she might have been hurt because there was blood everywhere, so charming family already. So the dynamic in this family is rather peculiar. They used to be rich, we learn later. And apparently, aside from Feyre, nobody has gotten used to the thought that they might actually have to work for their food and housing as yet. Because she seems to be the only one providing for the whole family. Okay, her dad is disabled after a knee injury. So that part's fair, but what about both of her sisters? Like, I can understand that if somebody is born rich and then loses all of it, that there might be one selfish git in the family who just doesn't understand that they actually have to pull their weight to get by. But 2 or 3 people out of 4 that sit around and do nothing while Feyre does all the work? It's a pretty shitty dynamic. While we learn a bit about their backstory, There are a couple of things that don't quite add up. Apparently they had to flee their estate in a hurry after they lost all of their money and people came for them, but they still managed to take some of the furniture. I don't know how people in this book flee from their homes, but I can tell you that I would not be taking my bed if I had to flee my home. But apparently they did, because they have a bed out of ironwood that is big enough for 3 people. We find out that Feyre takes care of her family because her mother made her promise on her deathbed. And with that we also get the comment that a promise is currency, but they also have currency as in money as well. But apparently not sticking to your promise has far-reaching consequences, assuming anybody else finds out, I guess. I don't know whether there's a magical aspect to this at some point or not, or whether that's just a done thing in this society, but yeah, regardless of how toxic her family is, Feyre will take care of them because she promised her mother as much. Her sisters do not improve over the course of this chapter. Apparently they parade around their little village and treat the peasants as like a second-class social circle because they no longer hang out with the high society that they were used to. All of the people they knew from their former life essentially ignore them, which also makes me wonder how far they moved from their previous home. It sounded like they had to flee their house to get away from debtors. But then you probably would move further than just to the village half an hour away where you still know people. Anyway, clearly this family was around their old house at some point for the sisters to find out that their friends no longer talk to them. And boy, do I not feel any pity for them. Feyre's sister Nesta drops the information that one of the peasants in the village wants to marry her, and I have to wonder why, because there's literally nothing nice about this person. She doesn't lift a finger, she's not helpful in any way, she's nasty to everybody. It's like, why would this guy want to marry this person? Especially because this place in a world where marriage still is a bit more of a practical thing, and you want to marry to somebody who can actually bring something to the marriage, either work or money, and Nesta has neither. There's more awkward phrasing in here. I countered, keeping my gaze as sturdy as possible. Now I'm pretty sure sturdy is a physical attribute that therefore cannot be applied to a gaze. Your gaze can be steady, but not sturdy, I don't think. So while learning that Feyre is taking care of her family because she's keeping up her end of a promise, we also learn that she's a hypocrite. Because throughout the chapter she tells you how she's dreaming of a quiet house for herself where she has nobody else she needs to take care of and where she has time to actually follow her passion, which is painting. But when her dad tells her that her sisters need something to hope, something to dream of, she just outright tells them that they don't have time for this, or that this is pointless. And it's like, okay, but what did you do throughout the chapter? So nice bit of hypocrisy here. And because Feyre is sticking up for her family despite the way that they treat her and how ungrateful and useless they are, just a note for real life, it's fine to cut people like that out of your life, even if they're family. Feyre doesn't do it because we need to know that her promise means everything to her and she will stick it out. But yeah, in real life, don't. In chapter 3, Feyre and her sisters head into the village to try and sell the pelts. Of course her sisters are coming along because they can sniff the money about Feyre, and suddenly she's far more interesting and maybe somebody should be nice to her from time to time. I would not describe anything they've done in chapter 2 as being nice to her, but since Feyre thinks she needs to take care of her sisters, they are tagging along to maybe get their hands on some of the money. They barely get into the village when they run into the children of the blessed, people who worship the high fae, and apparently none of the sisters thinks much of that, and Nesta even starts a fight with them. During their exchange we learn that sometimes people are sent to the high fae as brides for them, bird nester contests that and things that they just get eaten. So yeah, either you get married or get eaten. It's, different sides of the same coin apparently in this universe. After hearing a bit of news, Feyre thinks about how horrible and cruel the High Fae and the faeries in general are, but it also becomes clear that from all the things she does say, she has never actually encountered any of these beings herself, so all she has is rumors and hearsay and superstition. Feyre is oddly specific at points. She talks to this mercenary to sell the wolf pelt, and she estimates her age at like 25 to 30, and that seems very specific. And when I guess ages, it's like, yeah, somewhere in their 20s, in their 30s, but 25 to 30 is a very specific window with very little difference. We get a bit more backstory on the war between the High Fae and the humans that used to be slaves for them. Apparently they revolted in all the places at the same time, and the conflict dragged out long enough for them to actually force a peace treaty with the High Fae. They needed 6 queens to make this peace treaty happen, and that brings up more questions for the world building for me. Did they actually have like a kingdom or a monarchy while they were slaves? How did they win this fight or drag it out long enough to make this peace treaty happen if the High Fae can turn into beasts, have fairies and other beasts at their command, and have magic? And from the map you get at the beginning of the book, it looks like most of this country is Fae country, and there are comparatively few human beings. So if you go up against something that is so much more powerful than your average human being, then you would need a lot of human beings to make up for that. But from the map alone, it looks like there are a lot more Fae than humans maybe, or they just are spread out a lot more, I don't know. But it does make me wonder how the humans managed to force this peace treaty and get their own piece of country in the first place. Feyre actually has a moment that kind of makes me like her more. So this mercenary tells her about Martex attacks, where like a bear-lion hybrid has torn a whole village apart or something. Once again, only rumors, neither of them has seen any of this themselves. But while Feyre thinks about it, she looks at her sisters and then wonders how their pale skin is so infinitely delicate and shreddable. It's like, yes. Let's hope they don't get shredded. Maybe. Just maybe. Feyre sells those pelts for quite a bit of money, because the mercenary is weirdly generous for one of her kind, I guess. And the sisters come circling for money, and Feyre just equips them with some coins and then goes off to meet her soon-to-be-married boyfriend. It's not really romantic, they just have sex from time to time, so, not the most interesting relationship, but, at least she's not too sentimental about this. And in regards to this, we also learn the most important part about the world building, as I would see it. There are brews for contraception, but the guy has to take them. So, woo for equality in this. I'm not sure whether this will ever be relevant again in the whole story, but here we are. Contraception is something for both sexes to be involved in. Woo. Chapter 3 ends on a high note for me, with a beast busting down the door and attacking the family. So overall, not a lot has happened in those first 3 chapters. We get a good sense of what the setting looks like. It's, bleak forests, snow, it's hard to get by. So far, so good. Characters so far are fairly flat. Feyre is not so bad, but also not particularly exciting. Her sisters are about as flat as cardboard. I have plenty of questions left for the world building, and some of it might just be down to them not being answered yet. I think there's quite a bit of info dumping overall going on, with backstory for how the family used to be rich, how Feyre started dating this guy, how the humans ended up in the realm that they are in, how cruel the High Fae are. A couple of awkward phrases, like I pointed out, aside, the writing so far is okay. Nothing that I would describe as out of this world or amazing, but it seems okay. Let's hope this beast attack leads to some more violence. Or to the story actually starting, because so far not much has happened. Thank you folks for watching. Let me know whether you've read the book in the comments and what you make of it. Without any spoilers, because I've only read 3 chapters so far. I'll be back next week with another video. Like and subscribe if you want to help this channel out. And thank you again for stopping by. Bye!